Welcome to my August 21st video update. This show fits into the tips category type of show, and it came up recently because of some things I was doing in preparing for these video updates. Put another way, it has to do with how I work with the scripts that I prepare for these video updates, and for all my shows really, and how I work with them in preparing them and how I work with them and I'm actually recording a show. I've mentioned this topic before, but I thought that, especially for those of you that are considering starting out to making videos, or perhaps you've already started, that it's worth reminding people of ways, and we all do it a little bit differently, ways that people prepare their scripts or work with their scripts or even have scripts when they're doing video recording of themselves. And I tried, when I first started this, I tried it with a teleprompter, and I had found a great plan for making a teleprompter. It worked fine. The teleprompter worked fine. I didn't work so fine because I've learned working well with a teleprompter without it look like you're reading across the screen is difficult, and pacing yourself. I find it a lot easier to have, the way I do it, obviously, is to have a list of bulleted notes, and I try to stick to those. And if that way I can speak somewhat naturally. It brings in fewer ahs and ums, I've found, although those still creep in. But I'm smart enough now, because of somebody showing me or telling me about them, to try to cut them out as I'm post-processing my videos. So tip number one, do a test recording before you do your actual recording of what you are recording for a show. Plug everything in, run through it, try it, stop. Doesn't have to be long. Go back and listen to it with earphones, possibly is even better, and see if the sound's working. See if the setting is okay. I try to keep myself kind of on 1/3 of the frame, but that doesn't always work real well. I'm battling some sun, or it's not sun because we're having thunderstorm or thunder in the sky, and a thunderstorm is coming, but more light here than is here under this umbrella on our deck, and so it's a balance in trying to make sure that you've got the composition right, you've got the audio working, and so on. And I'm using the Saramonic mic that I talked about last week, and it took me probably 5 times until the Filmic Pro app showed me that it was recognizing the mic. So, do a test run. And this is where an app like Filmic Pro is really useful. And Filmic Pro is available for Android and for iOS. But it's nice because it has an audio meter that gives you feedback. So using some kind of an app that has that is really a good idea. So that's tip number one. So the next tip relates to the app that you use when you're recording your video, if you're using a smartphone, for example. And so tip number 2 is use an app that lets you pause the video just like a regular video recording camera does. You can record some, press the pause button, move your camera to a different perspective, or go through your notes or whatever it may be, and then hit the pause button again and it starts to record again. I do that all the time, and I really like that. In Filmic Pro, to make this work, whether it's iOS or Android, you go to the gear menu and choose Device. And in Device, you scroll down and you see Stitch Recorded Footage, and that basically causes the recording button to turn to a pause button when you press it to stop recording. And in order to completely stop recording, you press and hold the recording button, and then it goes back to its default white button, and it shows you the rest of the screen. Filmic Pro is not inexpensive, but it's a very, very professional app for video recording on a smartphone. Pausing is handy, as I said earlier, because then you can move the camera for a different perspective or a different location even, or as the case of these, you can stop it and then go through your notes a little bit if you're just a little unclear and it's not being picked up in the recording. The other thing I like about being able to pause is everything is in one file, so that makes it easier when you're post-processing your video. So there are other apps on both Android and iOS that give you this pause feature. On the iOS platform, there is an app that I've just recently became aware of, though it's been around for a long time. It's called Movie Pro Camera. And so that's one app. Another one is Video Cam. And a third one is Pause Cam Video Recorder. So the last two, Video Cam and Pause Cam Video Recorder, are initially free, but they have in-app purchases. Of the two, I like Video Cam because you can create a fine video with the free version. What you get for $4.99 with the in-app purchase is just the ability to edit that video. But I use LumaFusion after the fact anyway, so that's not important to me. Pause Cam Video Recorder, though, has a watermark, and it limits the length of the videos you can record. So there are in-app purchases for $1.99 and 99 cents, or several different ones. So that's another one to consider. Movie Pro Camera, on the other hand, is much like Filmic Pro, and it only $5.99. There's a remote app that goes with it too, which is also very handy, and together they were $8.99 US, whereas if I had bought them separately, they would have been $11 or something around there. So Movie Pro shows you audio meters, it shows you the audio levels, and it also lets you do the pause. And it's always active. It's always right there on the screen, which is kind of a nice feature. So for Android, the apps that I've found are, besides Filmic Pro, are Open Camera and FJ cameras, sometimes referred as FootJ camera. And of those two, I recommend Open Camera. It's totally free. It's an open source project, and it's really a very full-featured app for a free app, and it lets you pause the video as well. Tip number 3 is how I create and use my scripts when I'm doing my recording. I typically come up with 3 or more ideas of what I want to talk about over the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll jot those down. I use Pages, which is a word processing program on my iOS devices. So I pretty much use my iPad Pro as my computer for most of these things. And so I'll have these topics already set up with, the date and the topic name, and if I've already thought of a couple things, I've jotted those in. And if I come up with something else, like next week, if I come up with something new that's not on my list, I'll just move the other ones ahead if I think it's a little bit more timely. As the date gets closer, I flush out the notes in a particular item, like this one, and jot down in the order that I want to talk about things, but I use a bulleted list. I don't write it out longhand. I don't type it out in full sentences and so on. But I'll make a bulleted list of what I want to, more or less want to say on a given topic. Before I start recording, I'll read over that list, which I have in front of me right now. And when it's appropriate, occasionally I'll refer to it while I'm recording, or sometimes I'll stop the recording. It goes back to that other tip. And really study the next couple bullet points to make sure I've got them in my mind, and try to speak as naturally as possible when I'm recording to you. And then the other thing, of course, is the old tip that always comes back, is to remember to look at that lens and not this screen over here. It drives me crazy when I see people doing that, and I keep doing it myself, because it's just natural. You see yourself in that screen and you want to look at it. I don't know why. There's not much to look at really either. Okay, so anyway. So what I do is I type all that up. When I'm ready to start recording, I'll copy that script out of one document and put it in another document that I have, and I'll increase the font size to 24 points and make everything bold, so it's easier for me to see while it's sitting down there. Even if I glance at it, I can kind of tell what it's saying, and it makes it easier to refer to. And as I say, I don't read these things, and I've tried also making the bullet items more bullet items and less text, because I sometimes do write a sentence out, because if the sentence is written out, you tend to want to read it, and I don't want to do that. But that didn't work so well, so I've just gone back to the way I've been doing it for the last year or so, and it seems to work fairly well. And I'll ad lib as I go along, and then I'll have to stop the video usually, and push the button to stop the video, and catch myself up, get myself back on track. So one of the things that I think I mentioned a little bit earlier is that I've learned from this, or discovered from this, is I have fewer ahs and ums in my text, because I'm really trying to present myself as though you and I are sitting across the table having a drink and we're just talking about something, because that's what these really are meant for. They're really just kind of updates on what I'm thinking, and if you'd leave more comments, I'd find out what you're thinking, and I'd appreciate it if you did do that, because I really would like to know what you're thinking on the topics that I cover, if there are things that you find interesting. Okay, so that's tip number 3. Tip number 4. Tip number 4 is don't worry if you fumble up and mess up when you're recording. And this kind of goes with tip number 2, because if I find I've forgotten what I was talking about, or I've gone off on a tangent and I know I have and I want to refer to my notes without looking down, I'll stop the video. But if if I've just messed up a little bit, I'll just pause a little bit, breathe, and then I'll just start talking again back where I was before. That is to say, I'll start over again, because I know when I'm working on this video that I'm recording right now, in post, I can cut those things out, and you're not going to see them. It's a little intimidating when you first start this. First of all, it's intimidating to talk to yourself, or to talk to no one, if you will, or it appears you're talking to no one when you're looking at your camera and talking into it. That's a strange sensation, and I finally got over that. And then there's the issue that you think that everything has to be done in one take. That's not going to happen. So it doesn't matter about fumbling up, because you can fix it. So that's the important thing to remember with tip number 4. So let's go back over those tips. Okay, tip number 1, do a test recording before you do the final recording, the recording that you really are counting on. Tip number 2, find an app, if you're using an iOS device, that lets you pause, just like a video recording camera does. Tip number 3, come up with a strategy for notes for your recording that works for you. I use a bulleted list. Perhaps maybe you would do a more abbreviated bulleted list. Maybe you need to write it all out and read it over a couple times before you start recording, and then you don't even refer to it. If you're ever done any acting, that probably will work for you. I haven't done any acting since I was a senior in high school. It doesn't work for me. Okay? And then tip number 4 is don't worry. If you fumble, if you stutter, if you get confused, and it's just a short one, just stop, breathe, and then start talking again. And you can fix it in post. Okay? So I hope those 4 tips in today's episode are helpful to you. And if you have other tips that are related to these, or even if they're not related to these, please leave a comment. I appreciate the dialogue with you. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Good day.